Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm going to get us started. I'm Brianna Mabi. I'm the Program Officer for Women, Peace, and Security at the Kroc Institute for Peace and Justice, which is based at the University of San Diego. Thank you so much for joining us today to learn about the work of the Uganda NextGen Initiative and learn about the Uganda NextGen Framework, which are guidelines for intergenerational peacebuilding. I'm going to open us up with some introductions to what we're talking about today, who we are, and why we're all here today. I'm Brianna Mabi. I lead the work from the Kroc IPJ on women, peace, and security, and our mission more broadly is to co-create learning with peacemakers that's deeply grounded in lived experience, made rigorous by our place in a university ecosystem, and then is applied practically by peacemakers around the world to end cycles of violence. Together with local women peacebuilders and international women, peace, and security organizations, the Kroc IPJ identifies the most critical peacebuilding challenges facing women leaders around the world, and then co-develop applied and actionable research to identify evidence-based solutions. And that's exactly what the Uganda NextGen Initiative is about. The Kroc IPJ is the home for the Women Waging Peace Network, from which the Uganda NextGen Initiative emerged. The Women Waging Peace Network was established in 1999 and is a powerful, inclusive international community of peacebuilding experts of over 1,000 women peacebuilders around the world. The goal of the network is to connect women peacebuilders from conflict-affected areas around the world with each other and with policymakers. Launched in 2019, the Uganda NextGen Initiative emerged from the Women Waging Peace Network. The Uganda NextGen Initiative created 6 intergenerational partnerships in which senior and junior women peacemakers collaborated to implement a peacebuilding initiative based on a jointly identified need. This work was guided by 3 advisory group members, the Honorable Betty Bigombe, Rubina Rubimbwa, and Joanna Nakabito, and we are so grateful for their support. I also want to thank Noah Marembi Gabagogo and Septemba Olga for their leadership of this project. Between 2020 and 2023, this cohort of 12 peacebuilders working as 6 partnerships implemented a range of community-focused and advocacy-focused peacebuilding projects conducted in partnership with local leaders and with international partners. The cohort created the Uganda NextGen Framework to identify general principles to guide intergenerational partnerships in peacebuilding. It's one thing to build principles based on abstract ideas, it's another to practice them and to put them in place in reality. The process that we went through and the report that we're launching today aims to encourage and support future partnerships among different generations of women peacebuilders and to clarify principles for intergenerational partnerships in the Ugandan context, but these principles will also be helpful in other conflict and crisis-affected conflicts. The report provides a practical framework for creating intergenerational peacebuilding partnerships drawn from the lived experiences of women peacebuilders across Uganda, whom you'll hear from today, and outlines key considerations when addressing generational divides and gaps in peacebuilding efforts. The Uganda NextGen Framework, the report we're launching today, was created within the context of policies and practices of peacebuilding in Uganda, but they're intended to be helpful to an international audience. Similarly, this project focused on the experiences of women peacebuilders, but these principles and practices may apply to people of all genders. When we were meeting as a cohort about a month ago, I asked a question, when is this framework useful and not useful? And overwhelmingly, the partners in this project said, this framework is always useful. It is useful across sectors and across places and across types of work. I want to talk a little bit about what we mean by intergenerational peacebuilding. It's going to look different in different contexts, and it may be defined differently in different places. For us, we're thinking about it according to 3 big principles. We wanted to think about it as an equal partnership, not necessarily a teaching partnership between an older and a younger person, not necessarily a mentorship partnership, but one that's really marked by co-leadership and co-implementation. We were looking at partnerships that had visible and equitable roles for each partner. And one of the goals was to improve upon already established skills by sharing knowledge with each other, with the goal of longer-term transformational leadership. We know that age can affect women's access to knowledge and services and shapes how they can participate in decision-making processes. Young women are often blocked from taking leadership roles, and many cross-generational programs focus on mentoring, training, or teaching, Those are wonderful programs, but they serve a different purpose than building equitable partnerships between people of different generations. Young women peacebuilders may not have as many years of experience as senior counterparts, but they may offer new perspectives and critical skills. While we know that women of different ages or different generations may face different challenges, and thus it's important to include those voices, there are also challenges that women of all ages face, and taking an intergenerational approach is critical for intersectional work to both address those different experiences as well as those common experiences. I'm pleased to introduce Noah Mirembe Gabigobago to open with a bit of discussion about what we did together between 2020 and 2023 as part of this project. Noah supports the Uganda NextGen initiative in a coordination role. He is an international human rights lawyer and researcher on gender and sexuality, and he is passionate about gender equality and building partnerships to enhance that goal. Welcome, Noah.
Thank you, Brianna. Thank you so much for having me today, and welcome to everybody in the audience. My role today, as I've been already introduced, I serve in a coordinator role in the CROC IPJ program, and my role today is to share some of the key findings that we've been able to co-develop with the cohort of intergenerational peacebuilding partners over the last period of years between 2020 up to 20 and 23. I will not delve too far into the details of the program, as I believe most people have had access to the report, but I will give you a few highlights in terms of the activities, and then move on quickly to the key findings from those activities before inviting our panelists to speak more about the work that they did. You know that within the Ugandan context, we have at least about 55% of the population that's aged under 18 years of age. That was as of 2014. And certainly these numbers have changed over the years. And what this means for the context is that that intergenerational issues are of a major concern across the country. In particular, in 2019, Uganda identified 3 areas of concern in relation to gender equality. And one of these areas included gender-based violence. And so this is part of what informs our interest in both intergenerational approaches, but also the issue of gender-based violence in particular in a context like Uganda. From 2019, when the Women Waging Peace Network was initially conceptualized, in 2020, we followed up with a number of activities. And so we're able to initially form 3 partnerships in which we're able to test out different approaches to addressing gender-based violence, either in marketplaces and then in northern Uganda as well. And eventually we're able to expand to other regions of the country. What I must say that what's really exciting about the CROC IPJ project is the fact that we've been able to cover different parts of the country. Our partners have been working in northern Uganda, eastern Uganda, western Uganda, and central Uganda, among other places. And so it's been a really important learning point for us to see how intergenerational partnerships can work, not just in a centralized urban location, but also across distributed contexts in a place like Uganda. So we're really happy to learn and hear from folks who have done that. Among the key findings from our report or from our work together in this period of time, we found that practitioners often express that they lacked frameworks to help guide peace building with an intergenerational lens. Of course, there is a lot of important peace building work that has happened in Uganda and that continues to happen. But the question of intergenerational lens is really an issue that folks recognize as important. Also recognize that there are gaps in terms of how one practically implements such an approach. We also found that women of different ages experience distinct and common challenges, whereby greater inclusivity makes peace-building programming more effective. So this is something that we know broadly, but wanted to figure out how this works in a Ugandan context, how women of different ages experience both distinct and common challenges, and then around peace-building. And then we also wanted to look at we also wanted to explore what it would look like to support the new generation of peace builders, and taking this both as a responsibility and a strategy for success in peace building work in Uganda. In terms of our specific context and some of the things that we found in why peace building, why intergenerational peace building matters, is that age indeed affects access to knowledge and access to services and how women engage in decision-making spaces. The second key finding that we found was that women of different ages also experience different social expectations about what is appropriate and expected of them. And this affects whether they're able to participate fully in peace building processes within their different communities. We also found that physical security and access to resources can vary based on the intersection of women's identities and experiences. Again, this is something that folks will be able to speak to about access to resources, but again, access to physical safety, particularly within communities when doing peace building work, or when women raise their voices to participate in public conversations around their own safety. Lastly, we also heard about young women having been prevented from taking leadership roles, especially in women's organizations and in government, oftentimes feeling like their voices don't count and that they're not listened to when they speak up. And so these are some of the issues that we wanted to bridge, or what we're hoping to kind of bridge, to address, but also to work through as we implemented our own projects, intergenerational peace building partnership projects. I beg your pardon. And lastly, in why intergenerational partnerships matter, we have found that specifically in this work, considering generational differences helps to improve the impacts of peace building efforts, especially inclusion of people at different ages and different generations has helped to ensure effective peace building design and implementation. This is something that we witnessed through the work that the panelists are going to speak about, in the fact that if people were able to work across these different age groups and different generations, and in fact across intersectional issues, that there was different approaches that came out of those interventions, and this helped to ensure effective peace building projects and to design them in a way that was responsive to the needs of the community. Lastly, peace builders of all ages, of different ages working together, can better respond to community members and stakeholders across the age spectrum when intergenerational approaches are implemented. We observed that it helped a lot to have this specific approach really brought in contribution from a wider audience in terms of older women and younger women, youth, young children, all engaging across the issue of gender-based violence, which was something important for us to learn from. Right, so that's really the overview of the key findings from the report and the key findings from the framework itself. And now I think it's an opportune moment for us to learn from the people who've been doing this work since between 2020 to 2023, to share a little bit about their experience during this time. As a lot of you will remember, this was also a time when we had the COVID-19 lockdown. So a part of this project was implemented at a time when, with restricted movement, while the need was also quite high. And so it's really important and helpful for us to learn from the four panelists that we'll hear from in the next few minutes about an overview of what they did within the CROC IPJ project and why intergenerational partnerships matter, and some of the successes. Specifically, the panelists Grace, Jay, and Grace, Jay, Anne-Marie, and Sarah will be speaking about how applying an intergenerational lens has impacted their work, and they will also be speaking about how to do intergenerational peace building work in terms of the tools and strategies that they have found to make this successful. And so at this point, I would like to invite the next speakers, the panelists, or to introduce the next panelist of speakers. And these are some of the intergenerational peace building partners that we worked with. First is Sarah Nakame. Sarah is a development management practitioner with a passion for women, girls, and communities transformation. Sarah Nakame is the programs director with the mentoring and empowerment program for young women, MEMPRO Uganda. Welcome, Sarah. We're really happy to have you.
Thank you, Noah.
Next we have Anne-Marie Nantale. Anne-Marie Anne-Marie Nantale is the Executive Director of the National Women Association for Social and Education Advancement, NOASEA. Anne-Marie is also a lecturer at Busoga University and has a background in rural and environmental development. Welcome, Anne-Marie. We're really glad to have you. The next panelist will be Jaya Bang. Jaya Bang is a Ugandan queer feminist working in the civil society sphere. She has been working in the sector for the last 13 years. Jay is the co-founder and programs director at Health and Rights Initiative, HRI, in Lira, and the coordinator of the Uganda LBQ Plus network. Welcome, Jay. We are really glad to have you today. Last and by is Grace Nachirija Luanga. Grace Nachirija Luanga has over 2 decades of experience working on prevention and response to gender-based violence and promotion of gender transformative approaches. Grace is a founding trustee of Chapter for Empowerment and Rights Uganda, CERU, an Indrani Fellow, president of Terewode, and a GBV and disability consultant with Sight Savers International. Welcome, Grace. Grace, you're still muted. I think you said thank you, but I still think you're still muted.
Yes, thank you, Noah.
Wonderful. Great. So we'll just jump off straight into the conversation. And I'll start with yourself, Grace and Anne-Marie. How, if you could say a little bit about some of the work you've done and how applying an intergenerational lens has impacted your work. Grace, if you'd like to go first, and then we'll follow up to Anne-Marie.
Thank you, Noah. As already introduced, one of the key things the intergenerational framework supported us to do, that development in northern Uganda, specifically the district, is to establish a multi-sectoral gender-based referral network, which is based actually in Lira. We were able to ensure that girls and women experiencing violence get support from communities. And many of the communities were young people really talking about security. Whenever there was GBV, especially during COVID-19, we saw young people jumping in to support the survivors. But also on the other hand, we saw elderly people giving safe spaces in terms of informal shelters. So again, to ensure that the informal shelters were working, we saw young people again coming in to give security to actually the elderly homes for the elderly people, to ensure that perpetrators actually don't go in, like maybe to cause any havoc. And beyond the formal way of running a referral network, this was a unique opportunity. And the community, when it came to ownership, it became very easy for communities to own up this kind of work, especially preventing and responding to GBV, because they felt it is an issue for all of us, whether elderly, young, like everyone. It was a concern for everyone. And at national level, we managed to bring together development partners. And we introduced the idea of the intergenerational framework. And one of the key issues that came out is livelihoods for young people. For example, many development partners are raising funds to young people, but young people do not own land. They do not have resources. So for the livelihood to thrive, there was a whole recognition that the elderly, the parents, the grandparents must be brought on board. And in some areas where we have really taken this on as far as livelihood is concerned, especially in Western Island, Tororo, for example, we now see that older people are happily giving young people land to do the farming. And there is a lot of mutual benefits, whereby even, for example, a cow is looked after very well. It's a concern of everyone in the community because they look at it as development. And in terms of even the parish development model, for example, we have supported groups, both comprising of young people and also older persons, and even the middle age, to work together to see that there is a lot of they take forward economic empowerment in their communities. And this has worked very well. For example, the elderly people told us they cannot move to towns to buy like commodities for shops. So you find the young people are going to do this on their behalf. And when they come back, there is a lot of transparency. You see, he buys, he's given money, but when he comes back again, they sit and agree. So the whole issue of communication. Then lastly, when we look at cycles of gender-based violence, we are seeing that there are mothers-in-law and fathers-in-law who want to reinforce the whole issues of GBV. So you find that a mother-in-law, instead of telling the daughter-in-law that you and you, I all send you word, they are having better conversations of saying, recognize this is violence, don't live in it. These are the problems I had living as a woman and a wife in this community. So we see that the intergenerational framework promotes mutual understanding, but also transformative conversations that are enabling people to go and report the cases other than staying in abusive relationships. So on my side, Noah, those are some of the few things, but we have quite a number of lessons for the intergenerational framework. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Grace, for sharing a little bit about how applying an intergenerational lens has impacted your work, especially through the GBV network, and being able to negotiate within communities around allocation of resources, raising concerns around what young people need, but also helping ensure that young people have meaningful relationships within those communities, with the older members of the society, in order to be able to be mutually supportive and to kind of enhance each other's cooperation. I think that's really rich. Anne-Mary, you're very welcome to share your experience as well on how applying an intergenerational lens has impacted your work. Welcome, Anne-Mary. As Anne-Mary prepares to speak, I would also like to draw attention to Honorable Betty Bigombe, one of the Croc Advisory members, who has been able to join us for this call today. Welcome, Honorable Betty Bigombe. We'll have an opportunity to introduce you formally at some moment in the next few minutes. Anne-Mary, if you'd like to speak, if you're able to speak about applying an intergenerational lens to and how this has impacted your work, we'll be able to make a brief introduction and then come back to Honorable Bigombe. Oh, wait. Well, while Anne-Mary prepares, Honorable Bigombe, I see that you're ready. Is this an opportune moment to have you come in? I'd hate to put you on the spot if you're still adjusting, but Brianna?
And I'm happy to give the formal introduction as well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Bigombe, for joining us. We are so grateful for your leadership and your support of this project as an advisory committee member. So thank you across the years of work from this project. And thank you for being here with us today. I'll give a quick introduction and then we welcome you to give your remarks as well. And then we'll return to the panel. The Honorable Betty Bigombe is currently Uganda's ambassador to Malaysia. While based in Malaysia, she is accredited to Thailand, Indonesia, the Philippines, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar. Until recently, she was Senior Director for Fragility, Conflict, and Violence at the World Bank. Ambassador Bigombe has played a key role in conflict resolution across Africa. She led the peace and humanitarian efforts in northern Uganda, first in the 1990s as Minister of State for Northern Uganda, and again as chief mediator to the conflict in the mid-2000s. She is a recipient of many international awards, including the Ordre National de la Légion d'Honneur in 2016, being one of a number of awards honoring her longstanding commitment to peace and humanitarian affairs throughout her career. She has served as State Minister for Water Resources in the Ugandan Cabinet and a Member of Parliament. She is currently the Uganda Special Envoy to the peace process in South Sudan. Welcome, Ambassador Bigambe. Thank you so much for being with us. We welcome your statement.
Well, first and foremost, I would like to apologize for being late. I really wasn't late. It's just the system that let me down. And I'm glad that I finally managed to log in. First and foremost, since I don't have much time, I would like to thank you very, very much indeed for inviting me as part of the launch of this very important report. I would also like to thank the John Crouch Institute for having chosen Uganda as the first country to carry out this very important research. I'm particularly grateful to Brianna in a very special way and your team for guiding and steering this research to fruition. The same thing goes for the Ugandan team that weathered all kinds of challenges, because this process started during the COVID period, and therefore it wasn't very easy to get people together. So kudos to you for having achieved the objective of the report. On my part, I kind of feel guilty because I did not give as much time to this research as I should have, mainly because I was totally sucked into the South Sudan conflict mediation. So, and I gave so much of my time onto that. So I didn't give as much of my time as I should have. But all in all, I'd like to congratulate you for having initiated this report, and now it's finally come to its fruition. I want to say that this is a flagship project in that so many other people will benefit from it, because we as mediators, international mediators, in track one mediation processes, we're always advocating for intergenerational process. We talk about it, we advocate about it, but the gist of how it is done, it's not been clear. So this project kind of takes us to the actual way that it can be done and can be achieved. And so it's extremely important. But here, because no research of this nature has taken place. And oftentimes there's the attitude that the youth do not know enough because they don't have the experience, and kind of marginalized in the process. And yet, when it comes to violent conflict, I've read the report very quickly. We're talking about gender-based violence and all kinds of violence. I'm talking about the bigger picture, is that when it comes to violent conflicts, it's mainly the youth that are fighters, that are lured in, brought in when they're not part of the decision to go to war. And yet we don't bring them in to play a role. So this flagship project or now report is going to be used as a Bible, as a Quran, and to see how youth can meaningfully participate in the process. But the big challenge is implementation. Is it because I'm saying this because we have so many resolutions passed by UN Security Council. We have 1325, we have so many, the other one for youth and things, but a lot of them are not implemented. How are we going to ensure that this report will not sit and collect dust, and we're all going to pat our backs and say it was very successful, it's very well written, examples are clearly spelled out, and the strategies are all there, but make use of it. Today, we're living in a world of violent conflicts around us, all over the world. So we need this kind of guidelines and recommendations that we can translate into action. Violence, particularly Africa, notwithstanding what is going on in the Gaza right now, the very horrendous conflict that is taking thousands of lives and destruction. So is this something we could apply? Is this something that we can use? Talk about Uganda, where the report or the research was launched. Are we going to Uganda has all the indicators for conflict. You talk about poverty, which is a driver of conflict. It's the haves and the have-not, the disparity that exists today. You talk about youths, unemployed youth. This is a strong indicator for conflict. Universities and institutions are churning out youth without jobs. This is a big recipe for conflict. We talk about land dispute in Uganda today. It's everywhere. It's touching almost every family or every community. It's a strong driver of conflict. We're talking about climate change, which is a major problem today because our land is not getting any bigger. Our water bodies are being polluted and they're not being as productive as they're meant to be. These are drivers of conflict. Is this something that we can address at this point in time? Because it affects everybody across the board. And therefore, we need to see how we can utilize such experiences to make our people, young, old, appreciate the problems and use it as a measure for prevention of conflict. Your strategies are clear and very meaningful indeed. If we can utilize it for prevention of conflict, you talk about, you've given guidelines of engaging the communities. You're talking about, let me see, I wrote them all down here. Engaging communities, having dialogue, developing partnership. All these are recipes for prevention of conflict. Can we put them into action now rather than wait until later? Is this something that other countries could borrow and learn from, but not when it remains as a report that we can all read and say, fantastic job being done, which is true. But as they say, the taste of the pudding is in eating. It is how, the way it's going to succeed, that is going to make the report or the project successful. Since I've gone beyond the time that I was allotted, let me stop there. Thanks again and congratulations. I will remain with you for some time and then I have other engagements. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time with us today and your time across this project. We're so grateful for your support. Thank you so much. Noah, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you so very much, Brianna, and thank you so much, Honorable Bigombe, for that brilliant opening, because I think it really centers the broader international context and speaks, of course, to your incredible span of experience in highlighting for us who are working, especially nationally or even locally in our regions or context, about what is really important in terms of identifying some of those drivers for conflict in a broader sense. So having that eagle's eye view is really, really valuable for this conversation. And I think to bring it closer into the tangible to the tangible part in responding to some of the gaps you raised, you also highlight, Honorable, an important gap, which is in the implementation in that there are incredible policies at international level, many of which we've adopted even at national level. But indeed, one of the major gaps is in the practical aspects of this and in implementation. Without taking much further time, I would want to invite Sarah to speak directly to that question about how you do intergenerational work. We've already heard a little bit about how applying an intergenerational lens has impacted the work from other colleagues. Sarah, are you able to speak to how you actually do intergenerational work? What tools or strategies have you found to make for a recipe for success that the Honorable is inviting us towards?
Right. Thank you very much, Noah. And it's actually a pleasure to speak after our dear Honorable. And so the way MEPRO, the Mentoring and Empowerment Program for Young Women, approaches intergenerational work, number one, is through storytelling. And so we embed storytelling into the different approaches and strategies that we use, purely because of the power of hearing firsthand from the different generations of women what they go through, whether that is at the economic, in the private space, in CSO work, but also in school. So I will rotate around the idea of storytelling and how we have webbed it in the different programs that we do. So the number one strategy that we applied was we conducted a training of trainers for peace builders. And this was for 40 people. And our congregation was of young girls in secondary schools. We had young women in universities and some women over 45 and actually 60. And then the training of trainers was conducted by a professional doctor from Makerere University. And why that was important for us is we needed to break down the concept of peace building for our trainees, so that after the training is done, they're able to take back the lessons, but also to draw in communities from wherever they are in the discussions on what peace means for individuals, what it means for our communities. So the training of trainers was intergenerational in that sense. And like what I started talking about storytelling. So when we talk about resilience, or when we talk about preventing violence, or even when we talk about how do we respond in crisis. So it was listening from the stories of the older women in the room and the young girls, and exchanging on how they approach the different scenarios. And the richness then is drawing lessons from the different contexts and the different generations. So storytelling at MEMPRO is very unique, and we hold it dear in all the different programs that we deliver and the strategies. And then we follow this up with feminist dialogues. So having done, the training of trainers for the peace building, then we convened safe spaces. And Noah, when you openly said that we did this project during the hard time of lockdown, and it was really, really hard. And so people were eager and, were excited to be invited to spaces where they can talk about the things that they are dealing with in the moment. I remember the first dialogue we had was mostly teachers. And, for private schools, they were not being paid at that time because the schools were locked and they're not, it's not a public school. So, so teachers were really affected. And of course, young girls. And so listening, the story that really sticks to my head was teacher Vicky, who for a period of over 6 months was unable to go back to her home during daytime. So she would only wait until, when it's dark, 7 p.m. thereabouts, that's when she would return home because of the landlord issues. Remember, we had been through the lockdown, teachers are not being paid, and so people are, experiencing different hardships. So, but when we had this dialogue, it gave them opportunity to hear that actually other people are also experiencing similar challenges. But then how do we, in this dialogue, how do we build a sisterhood and support each other through this? Maybe you can walk to a neighbor and, share a meal, or maybe you can, call up your senior and talk to them about this. But also, MEMPRO provided them the opportunity to just feel human, to feel that they are seen and that we hear them. And that was the response that we got mostly from them. Important stakeholders. And we see that there was a sequence and the rationale in which we delivered it. So first of all, theory about peace building, helping the people that we're going to walk this journey with understand what it is from the theoretical perspective, but also when we come together through dialogues, how do we exist together peacefully? What does inner peace mean for me? And so the sisterhood gift hampers spoke to the practical needs of our communities. And so we put together a hamper of food and sanitary hygiene products and pocket money. And we reached out to still 42 young women teachers, again, because of the need that we realized in our community. And it was just to say that if you cannot have a meal on the table, how then do we talk about peace beyond yourself? And then for teacher Vicky, she was able to pay up a bit of her rent from the pocket money that we provided. And so we were really, really grateful for this project because it helped us to bridge, those intergenerational lessons that need to be passed over. So for example, in relationships, I remember when we were doing the training of trainers, people were talking about, oh, now relationships, we are facing many hardships, breakovers, what? And the young women are saying, but you need to be resilient. And the younger girls are saying, but what does resilience mean? In our context now, in a time where, we're having a crisis of online shaming and we have to work and be out of the home, what does resilience mean? So bringing those conversations together and helping people know that therefore you cannot just force something that you did in the past on the young. So when you are passing on, and then it comes from a point of reflection and understanding and empathy and all those things. So I'm just tying in from how we started to where we went. And so the icing on the cake for us then was the advocacy meeting with parliamentarians. So when we had been through, the training of trainers, the conversations, and we have girls in schools and young women in universities, and the teachers that we worked with mostly during this project. Then we invited them together for an advocacy meeting with parliamentarians who have been a good voice, a rallying point for issues on sexual reproductive health and wellness. So remember, we discussed issues in our feminist conversations, and wellness came top notch on what does it mean to be well during a lockdown. What does it mean to be well in an environment where data costs are high and learning is mostly online? What does wellness mean? What does peace mean in such circumstances? And so the advocacy meeting with the parliamentarians was also attended by our other partners in CSO doing work on sexual reproductive health and peace building. And so our executive director presented a paper, again, still on SRH and peace and wellness. And the girls, we gave an opportunity to think about 3 girls to also, voice their concerns to our members of parliament and see how then we forge our way forward in realizing the beautiful policies that we have and just really encouraging or challenging our parliamentarians to take the issues more seriously, to advocate more, and also be part of us when we in such spaces, but also to hear from the people for whom these policies are made for. And so that is how those are the strategies, and that is how we're able to implement this peace building project from an intergenerational lens.
Thank you so very much, Sarah. That was right on time. You've highlighted a number of important points, but I'll not go over them at right now. I really, appreciate it. I think a lot of it sounds like a bridge between the big themes that Honorable Bigombe highlighted for us in terms of what's missing and what you've actually been able to do and how you moved from individual stories and bridging that into feeding into a national narrative and feeding into a national response. Jay, are you there? Are you able to speak to us and add on to this about how you do intergenerational work and what tools or strategies that you found to make it work? Especially, I'm interested because of your approach through intersectionality, which combines both intersectional and intergenerational approaches. But still, if you're able to speak more broadly about how you do intergenerational work and what tools and or strategies that you found to make for a recipe for success.
Thank you so much, Noah. Thank you. I think for us, what has been very important is embracing diversity and inclusivity, but also understanding that all oppressions is connected. And for us, because our core constituency was LB women and female sex workers, and one perspective was saying that wherever you come from, whatever your experience is, I think it matters, is particularly when you bring everything on the table and try to understand where the connection is, but also how do we tackle the problem. So for us, we worked with the two different stakeholders. The primary stakeholders were, of course, the LB community and female sex workers. And the second stakeholders were the district leadership, the local district leadership in Lira City, and also the cultural leaders. But for the primary stakeholders, the issue was around understanding GBV, what are they facing, where do they go to seek redress, how do they want to be supported, and where is the support? And I remember Grace talked about the referral networks. Where are the referral networks that work for our primary constituency? But also who in the secondary constituency is supporting, is supporting, the redress of this, violence. So we had one-on-one conversations with the district stakeholders. Of course, we had intended to have a general meeting, but of course they told us, the kind of group that you're working with is very sensitive. I think that's a very common word in Uganda lately. It's very sensitive. So we need to meet one-on-one and in a private place, So it was quite interesting to hear that. But also for me, what was interesting majorly is them even accepting to meet, even if they didn't want to meet, in the bigger group was something, very important. So we had one-on-one discussions with them because I think what was confusing a lot within the work that we do and the kind of people we work with was the issue of recruitment. Because when we met the RCC in Lira, he was concerned. He told us, we have your file here, and you're being accused of ABCD. So we said, oh, this is a good opportunity then for us to, to clear the air, to tell you actually the kind of work that we do. So when we understood the kind of work that we did, it was actually very supportive. And he actually promised, to join in activities that we have planned, for example, the tree planting. But prior to that, of course, we also had, because we wanted to level the ground so that when we start the training, because one of the activities was training peace mediators, to be able to, to share, the experiences, but also to mediate between the different constituencies that we work with. So we wanted to meet with the district leadership so that when we start those meetings and this training, we are not raided as is always. So that was a very good ground setting for us. And also the cultural leaders that we spoke to, some were very welcoming. They of course told us they didn't understand the work that we did, but now that we have come to them, they recognize that GBV is a serious issue, and given the context of northern Uganda, the aftermath of the the LRA war that still lingers, GBV is actually a real problem in the region. And for us, because we were specifically talking about LB women and female sex workers, that for them was also an issue that they never actually thought about. Because normally when you're talking about GBV, you talk about it broadly. So for them to bring that conversation to them was an eye opener for them, because so often we have had that, our consequences were taken to, to the clan leadership to be beaten. We have seen we had so many stories of women who have been beaten in the clan because of who they are or how they identify. But even those who, were excommunicated from from their communities, but also even, pushed out of the jobs where they work because of who they are and how they identify. So that was quite interesting. But of course, we still have, those who are saying, no, this is not right. We cannot be part of this. But for us, that is, those who accepted to come, to come on board with us, that was, of course, the quick wins that, we consider them. The other thing is that by the training of the peace mediators, our approach was to first, have a shared leadership. That we are not saying that we know it all, we don't know it all. We are learning from your lived experiences and want you to be part of this conversation or part of this intervention from a point of sharing your experiences, but because you understand your issues better, you understand your story better, and you can tell it better. So therefore, it's important for you also to come onto the table with that experience and share leadership on how to move forward, with the conversation, but also find lasting solutions to, to the problems that you're facing on TV. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jay, about highlighting those important issues around diversity, about the importance of identifying a diversity in peace building, especially considering the changing context in Uganda and other places on the continent. Talking about the importance of building bridges between primary and secondary constituencies, collaborating with local leaders, and also the importance of shared leadership within the partnership. Anne-Marie, are you still here? Are you able to speak with us about how this approach has impacted your work? Anne-Marie, are you still here? Anne-Marie? Okay, right. As Anne-Marie prepares, I believe we are nearly at the top of the hour, which means that this is time for probably the closing in the closing section of this. We should have maybe a few minutes to spare for one question or two, I don't know. And we have a closing coming up. Over to you, Brianna. I see Honorable
so much.
hand, so maybe we can go there and then, yeah.
Absolutely. Ambassador, please go ahead. You're muted. Oh, there. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Very interesting listening to the two speakers. And again, I'm sorry that I wasn't there right at the beginning because of technology issue. One little thing is that although this project specifically targets women, I just want to emphasize the importance of involving men, because it takes two to tango, not just one side. So maybe in future, it might not be Uganda, but to also involve the youth, the young men in the process, get their perspective, whether it is gender-based violence, whether it's sharing or fighting, because we cannot do it alone without the other party, without the men, the youth who are men, they getting involved to get their perspective in whatever is going on. So I just thought I would highlight on that, the importance of it, if we're going to carry this forward, because they can also undermine it. They're left out. It's about inclusivity. When we're talking about inclusivity, it should not just be about women. We complain because women are left out in conflict resolution, in mediation, and we're preaching inclusivity. We must we must be an example that we bring men on board when we are carrying out such projects, get there as a perspective also factored into the project. I just thought I would say that, that in future we need to do that as well. It's not do as I say, but don't do as I do. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that reflection as we think about how to be fully intersectional, fully inclusive. Thank you so much. As we come to the end of our event today, I'm so sorry that we don't have time for a big question and answer section, but I am excited to welcome our closing speaker, which is another of our Uganda NextGen cohort. So I'm excited to welcome Immaculate to speak with us. Immaculate Mukasa is the team leader of the Mentoring and Empowerment Program for Young Women, or MEMPRO. She is committed to enhancing confidence, agency, and accountability among youths, and passionate about community change that involves getting girls and women to decision-making platforms. Welcome, Immaculate, for our closing statement today.
Thank you very much, Brianna, and I'm so proud to be part of this convening today, the launch of this report. And in closing, I would like to just say one or two things that have been mentioned during this meeting. And let me start with Honorable Betty Bikome's words of the drivers of conflict in Uganda: poverty, the youth without jobs, land disputes in Uganda, climate change, and indeed its effects. So for me, this is proof that Uganda was the right place to draw lessons from and feed into this guide. And so thanks Crooks Institute for choosing Uganda. And the tools that we have used, I think they are really replicable. The storytelling, capacity building sessions, and building cohort of other peace builders, the feminist dialogues, advocacy, engagements of leaders at different levels, family, community level dialogues are really replicable. And what we also draw from here is that it's important to meet both the strategic and practical needs and the intersecting needs of the people in order to realize peace and have meaningful engagements. There was a word into the peace and cooperation in families that was realized and shared by Grace. So and here I'm sure that youths and men, as well as women and girls, were involved in order to realize the mutual understanding that was demonstrated in property sharing, trust among generations, and the desire to support each other, and thus contributing to violence-free communities. It's very, very important to have trust in the families and in the communities at large. The experience shared here indicates that we can learn something from each other, and every generation has something to offer for peace and security of the world. We have indeed challenged harmful gender and social norms, and the report for me proves that intergenerational initiatives make a difference, and there should be the building block that has to be strengthened for sustained practices that enhance peace and security. For us in Uganda, the launch of this report is one way of acknowledging and celebrating this significant milestone in our country, and we are proud to be part of the Crooks Institute and the Next Generation Project. So as we live, it's a challenge for all of us. How best can we use the guidelines and the recommendations to move forward for violence-free communities, families, and nations? Can we share this report far and wide? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Immaculate. Thank you to all of our panelists, especially the Honorable Betty Bikombe. Thank you to all of the Uganda NextGen partners who weren't part of this event today, but I know are listening in online or have been part of this work over the last 3 years. I want to thank you all for joining us and learning together. And I'll say that from my end, it has been such an honor and a privilege to learn together through this process. So thank you so much. I hope you will take time to read the report. We've summarized findings here today, but the report has really concrete examples, clear guidelines for both short-term and long-term steps for thinking both about how do you build an intergenerational partnership today, but also how do we think about transformational peace-building leadership in the long term. So I hope you'll take a look at our website here or follow us on social media and look at the full report. You can also learn more about each of the amazing partners on our website. The partnerships are highlighted through a series of videos as well as a blurb on our website. So thank you so much for those of you who are part of this community for your amazing work and partnership. And for those of you joining us online for this report launch, thank you for being part of this work and part of a movement to think as Ambassador Bagombe said, about being more inclusive and more open and more welcoming to leadership of all variety. So thank you all so very much for being here, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.